As educational leaders with a global perspective, we recognize that learning and leading are intrinsically linked to the emotional and social dynamics present within every organization. Our research has shifted the focus from asking why to exploring how, prioritizing practical strategies that empower individuals to engage meaningfully with their workplace and community. By sharing our stories and proven practices, we emphasize the importance of social emotional leadership as the cornerstone for cultivating a sense of belonging among members of your workforce. Through intentional development of emotional intelligence and relationship building skills, individuals are equipped not only to thrive professionally, but also to enrich their personal lives. This approach encourages the formation of habits centered on active participation and ownership, transforming organizational culture and community engagement. By fostering emotional leadership, we pave the way for lasting change, where every member feels valued, connected, and capable of contributing to shared success.
It's your thing. Do what you wanna do. I can't tell you what the song get to. It's your thing. Do what you wanna do.
Welcome back to episode 9 of Habit Over Why. Today we'll be talking about Are You Ready and Readiness. Claudio, how you doing tonight?
I'm well, Jeevan. Thanks for taking control today and doing the keyboard thing.
Not bad. We're getting better at this.
We are.
Yes, and let's start off with thanking our audience because we are seeing an uptick in the audience, so we know that our message is getting out there. We're very happy for the support, and we want to thank you before we start this episode. Claudio?
We want to tell our audience to understand we're going to tell you why.
And show you how. And
That's
today is
right.
readiness.
Right.
So are you ready for this, Claudio?
I'm ready. I've been ready all my life now.
Okay, so readiness is an important concept to both of us because actually Claudio brought this up to me a little while back when I was just being a mentee to him and before the podcast and all this stuff. It's a concept that we truly believe that not enough leaders are talking about because we're so focused on change and change initiatives. Sometimes we forget about the human beings behind that change. And today we want to talk about how can you tell if your staff or the group you're working with and the individuals you're working with are ready to be part of the process of change. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a little bit of definition here. I'm going to read it off my pad here. I found a definition that said readiness is defined as a state of being fully prepared for something or the willingness to do something. So that's the state of being fully prepared or the willingness to do something. Okay, Claudio, let's dig a little deeper. Why is readiness important? Can you define it in your own words? How did you come up around this concept?
Well, I think, from your definition, I think for me, the key word is willingness there. And how I came to understand the concept of readiness was through my master's program. When I was writing my thesis, I came upon the concept of readiness in what I did was I used some surveys and gathered some information and found some researchers that looked at the concept of readiness in adulthood. But really the initial curiosity was piqued when we talked about, readiness in kindergarten students and readiness to read. And I really wanted to connect that if that happens for kids, it's got to happen for adults too. And why is it that we don't look at adult readiness and making sure we support them when they are ready? And so the concept of a readiness rubric was sort of flushed out where I looked at various teaching tools in technology in America at the time, specifically when they were looking at how do you implement specific technology tools, and they had readiness rubrics for technology implementation. So you had to pass through each scale to be successful to go to the next scale. And the adaptation was, well, there's other things that people could do to be ready for an awareness and understanding of implementing things in schools and understanding people's levels of readiness and why they are or are not ready.
Yeah. So I call it the spectrum of readiness.
There you go.
Yeah. So people can be not ready. They can kind of be in the middle. They could be fully ready and always go on.
Yeah.
So let's take it to a scenario. I know we've talked about readiness scenarios. I'm going to bring up one for you. Maybe one you didn't maybe succeed at first, and what happened there. And it's a great story.
Yeah. So at a school, a French immersion school, I tried to implement a reading strategy program. I introduced it to the staff. I had the resource teachers involved. We met, we talked about it, told them that I could buy all of the resources back to the staff, and had a sort of a discussion. And I got less than half the staff interested in buying into the whole concept of this program. So it didn't fly, and I didn't get a chance to implement that at that school. But fast forward to the next school that I went to, I had this sort of idea in mind. The staff were a little more open-minded. We met and we had a conversation. So instead of doing this implementation with the whole staff, I thought maybe I just start with the primary teachers. I did it with the primary teachers. We had a meeting, we had an agreement. I implemented it with the primary teachers. Shortly after it was implemented, the intermediate teachers saw how much support and success that they were having.
Yeah.
So they said, well, we want to do this too. So over time, they were all ready. It just didn't happen at the same time. But 100% buy-in, increase in reading levels for the whole school, best practice strategies, and it worked. And it continued to be used at that school for as long as I was there. Yeah.
And that's a great example. So like the reason why I wanted our audience to hear that example is like not the initiatives can be foolproof and needed, and you have the processes and systems set, but if the staff or the group is not ready, it doesn't matter what you do, it's going to fall flat. It's going to fall flat. So what I also heard you do as a leader is how you can leverage those things is don't forget about those times. Next time you went to the new school, what you did was you understood it didn't work with the bigger group. So you worked with individuals and a smaller group, and then you scaled it up. So if you are not comfortable and you haven't been working as a leader in the industry for a longer period of time, what you can do is start gauging the readiness of the staff for a smaller group, for a smaller project. And then this thing that happens sometimes is when you get a couple smaller projects up and running and people say they're working, then a lot of people that might have not been ready might join and be ready to listen.
Mm-hmm.
So great example there. I know my scenario is for the people is very similar in the way that I don't think it fully worked. I was a new leader. My intentions were great. My systems were unbelievable. Picture this. You get to a school, you notice that it's not a toxic culture, but there's a lot of toxic behavior. People are not being so friendly to each other. And then you learn that it's been going on for years. You hear the stories with different individuals. What I did was I actually got my LSS staff, my learning support staff together. We did surveys. So that's one thing you can do is but I was doing surveys on the change, not the readiness for the change. And that's where I failed, is because we ended up setting up 3 half-day Pro Ds on communication styles because we were able to hone in on what the actual challenge or barrier was. But being a new leader, I didn't understand the idea of readiness. So we gave these excellent presentations and these workshops, but they fell flat because 80% of the staff, again, was not ready or not willing. So what happened is the 20% that was willing, they even learned a lot. So I took the small win, but in essence, it didn't actually take off. I was hard on myself at that time, but as new leaders, I want you to know that this is what I want to talk about. We want to talk about readiness because not many people actually talk about it because they're always talking about how to push initiatives forward. Fast forward again, new school, again, similar to you, smaller group of people that are not ready for a bigger initiative. I was able to have those conversations. So one how is having individual conversations and looking for keywords, checking to see if these people are problem focused or are they solution focused. Again, so one of the hows that we want to make you aware of is the importance of language in conversations and pointed questions to figure out if the individual is ready. And you can do that individually and you can do that as a group.
Agreed. I think, something else that we talked that was shared there that we didn't touch on was the concept of failure and being open to failure
Yeah.
and not letting that failure define your next move or success.
Yes.
So being a risk taker in the whole concept of readiness
Yeah.
and openness.
Yeah. And I call it now practice. So like when I fail at something, like it's practice. I'm putting in those reps. Not everybody, even the biggest superstars there, like one person that I idolized when I was younger as a teen was Michael Jordan. And even that guy did not make his high school team, right? So, but he practiced. So he
Uh-huh.
took those failures and we made them into successes down the road. So that's something that you want to do. Two-pronged there is like, okay, you assessing the readiness of the staff. First school, not ready. So the whole program, it didn't matter how, I'm sure it was very technical, very organized, done very well, but because the readiness of the staff was just not there, it just didn't go through. But you didn't give up. So to me, it's two-pronged is your readiness was high. And then you also went back, you looped back and reflected, and then you were ready, you probably adapted, changed a few things, were able to better gauge the readiness of your staff is what I'm hearing, and then push that initiative through. So this is why we think that readiness is such an underrated thing that no one really talks about, because people talk about change, they talk about shifting culture, they talk about, transforming teams, but you also have to understand that everyone on that team has different life experience, and we've talked about this, and those life experiences might make some players on the team not ready, whereas other ones are ready. And it's our job as leaders to not only create systems and processes that can make an organization successful, but also assess the readiness of the people within there that we're working with.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
we've touched on psychological safety, and part of that risk-taking behavior to trust people to do things and be ready
for sure.
is what we're talking about right now. It's about the quiet conversation with somebody that's not ready. It's
Yeah,
about introducing a book
yeah,
to them that might help them understand a little bit more. It's about aligning them with another mentor or somebody that will allow them to feel that they can buy into the next level of where they actually are ready on that readiness continuum or rubric run.
yeah, for sure, for sure. I know I have a very similar story. Like when it was my second gig at a school as being a head teacher, and I was placed in a school where uh, I quickly learned that there was maybe it wasn't a toxic school, but there was a toxic environment where people were not getting along, and just the way that they interacted with each other was not the greatest. And like you, what I did was I actually brought my learning support service team in there. And I was gung ho because I just fresh off doing my master's, I had the need gaps analysis. I was able to create surveys. So that's one thing I did. And the other thing I did was also I did a relationship map of like the groups of people that were, there and the friction that they had with other groups. In the end, what I did was I was still learning. I was being mentored by people from the district. I also leveraged some of the union people, and we got to the bottom of it was it was communication styles. It wasn't that people were trying to be mean necessarily to each other. And there was instances where it would come off that, and that would be a secondary thing. But the styles of the people did not align. So the communication styles, or what one person did and the other person, their communication style was totally different. And so that's where the friction was. Long story short, created a 3 half-day professional development on communication. That went okay. There's some of the staff, like you talk about readiness, they were ready to hear it. There was the other staff that was not ready to hear it. And so one of the things I learned really fast was, like you, is did the change ultimately make huge differences in the staff? Probably not huge differences, but it did push it forward just a little bit that the people who were really ready to change, they had this new awareness. Fast forward, went to another school after that, and I had a small group of staff, similar situation. It wasn't the whole staff. And I was able to leverage what I had learned. And at that point, I didn't know it was readiness that these people were missing. So I was able to have better conversations saying, hey, you know what? I have something to anchor this in. And so therefore, I was able to move those people through things faster, initiatives faster. So again, just like you, one thing I continue to learn is to kind of analyze the readiness of a team. So Claudia, how do you analyze? Like, so for a new leader coming in now, we're getting to ante up here. We're not just worried about you guys being able to do leading great initiatives. It's like, how do you know that the team you're on is ready? What are some? I find that there's some telltale signs when you have readiness within individuals or groups. So let's maybe flesh through some of those.
So before we get into that, I think what people need to know is that this is founded in the research that we talk about, right?
Yep.
So I've basically done
Master of reading.
I've done the research, and I found 3 people that I've been able to take concepts from.
And you're not being paid by these 3 people to.
I'm not.
No, you're not affiliated with them. I have to put that out there.
One of them is called Sharon Merriam, and the other one is called Kathy Caffarella.
Okay.
The third person is Malcolm Knowles.
Okay.
The first two have a concept that's called learning in adulthood. And Knowles, the third guy, has what he calls an androgynous theory of adult learning. And the first two, Caffarella and Miriam, they talk about roadblocks to learning in adulthood.
Okay.
And basically what they say is not all people are ready at the same time, because you have a mortgage, I don't have a mortgage. You got 2 kids, I don't have 2 kids. You're not ready, but I'm ready because I can align my professional life, my personal life more readily, so that I'm open to receive information and feedback about how to implement or do something.
Okay.
And so that's that piece. The other piece, the androgynous piece by Knowles, he looks at assumptions and principles. And what his assumptions and principles are, they focus on is your self-concept or self-worth, your experiences in an area, your readiness to learn, your orientation to learning that specific skill. You need to know the why behind why you're learning it. And motivation. Are you intrinsically motivated? Are you extrinsically motivated? What motivates you to do the work that needs to be done? So I have my own little criteria checklist, and I analyze these things in my head. And when I talk to somebody, it could be, well, we've started this committee. I'd really like you on board. I know that you do a really good job at leading and working with kids in this specific area. And they say, no, I can't join the committee. And so I ask why.
Yeah.
And I find out a little bit more about the reasons or rationale. And I don't push. I just say, okay, I understand. But hopefully at some point, the invitation is there, community building, Peter Block, the criteria is there, self-assessment. let's engage in a conversation later on to see if there's anything that I can do to
Yeah.
help you. Drop a note. Are you ready? Give them an article. They might not be ready for 6 months. They might not be ready until the following year. But I think through prompts and conversations and relationship building,
Yeah.
you can massage that person's ability to be ready. It's like the rubric that I've got in the back of my mind about where they fit on that rubric and
Yeah.
how we're going to get them to the next level of that readiness rubric.
So
That's
what I'm
my
hearing,
job.
from for the first how for our new leaders is having individual conversations with people and open-ended conversations. Like think about an initiative or something that you want to move forward and kind of start asking probing questions like, hey, have you ever thought about this? What would you do if you were in my shoes?
Ah,
I'm noticing this. Have
mm,
you noticed this before? Or are you currently noticing this?
mm.
So just kind of welcoming them into that conversation to see how ready they are. And in the end, they might notice all the same things, but they might be like, yeah, you know what, but I'm just too busy with doing A, B, and C. And that's okay. At least you've assessed their individual readiness.
Yeah, and I think beyond that, the actual strategy or implementation, you know, are people ready to hear the idea?
100%.
If you get 20% buy-in, then you know that they're not ready to hear that idea. And that idea might need to be put on the shelf, and you might have to come back to it at a
For
later
sure.
time. But if you've
Yeah.
got 50-50, well,
Yeah.
that's when you start to use the levers and your
Oh, yeah.
leverage.
Yeah. And one of the other hows, which I just stumbled on in my last school, was the staff actually flipped the script on me. It was quite amazing. The staff was just unbelievable, where they had already internalized the challenges and the barriers at that place. So when we got to a point where I was like, hey, so why don't we slow down here? And what are some changes? Like if you had the ability to change three things here, ordering them from like most important to least important, what would those three things be? And everybody engaged. Some of the answers were totally different, but there were some that were so overlapping. So then what I did was I went one step further. Then I collated all the data and then I presented it at a staff meeting, said, hey, these are the things that you guys are saying that are challenging. So I was able to almost skip that step of interviewing people or having conversations with people is because people had already told me this was important to them. And I knew who it was. Generally, I knew who it was because people were coming to me and having conversations. And then so when I was putting together committees, I knew exactly who to go to, who was ready. And then there were some people who were quieter, who I know wanted to change, but they were lower on the readiness scale. And then I invited them and I let them know that, hey, this would be a great learning opportunity to gain some skills. And that's also our job as leaders is when a person's not ready, to acknowledge it and then give them an opportunity to up their skills so that they might be ready later.
Yeah, no, I'm while you're talking, I'm listening and I'm thinking that, again, it's about scale of conversation, scale of implementation, scale of whatever it is that you're trying to do. Because in most organizations, having consensus or gaining consensus is virtually impossible.
Oh, yeah, 100% consensus is virtually.
So, you know, we talked about, 20% not ready, 80% ready,
Yeah,
20% ready, 80% not ready, 50% ready, 50% not ready. And I think the context of that continuum, your readiness skill and activity, the hows, they look different within that continuum, right?
yeah,
Because if
for
it's
sure.
if it's 80% not ready, you're not going to waste your time and energy there then. But when you're 50% invested or 80% invested and you've got that much buy-in, then you start to do the real work of, helping people understand what it is that you're really trying to do and how to get them to be on board to do the work that's required. And if it's not right then, it's, well, maybe I need you in 3 months to buy in.
Yep.
Maybe, when can I start to have this conversation with you again?
Yep. So let's I want to dig into that a little bit. So I'm going to throw a wrench in there. So
Yeah.
you check for readiness, you start an initiative you want to push through. Someone who is clearly not ready joins that initiative and sabotage it. So as a leader, how do you identify that person is not ready? So some of the language that they might use, things like that. And then what do you do in those circumstances? Because we've all been on teams where someone joins and they actually are not there for moving that initiative forward in the organization. So Claudia, how do you deal with that?
Well, I think, first of all, you listen. If they've joined the committee or the group and you know that the intent of the committee as a trusting observer and building trust with people, if the intent is for everybody to do the job of moving that forward, if this person joined the committee and continually puts roadblocks up or finds loopholes as to why not to, then not only you, but the rest of the people will soon understand that that's a sabotage because they like status quo. And the only reason they join the committee is to keep things the same way as they are, not to move that agenda forward. So how do you deal with that person after that?
Yeah, so one of the things I know we want to do on this podcast is create shortcuts for people, new leaders coming through that we didn't have someone tell us about, right? So that they can better succeed. So how would you, let's not deal with that person, but how would you rectify that situation? How would you even as a new leader,
Right.
you're
I would go to that person and in a transparent way, I would use the word transparent and I would say, look, I'm just being completely transparent with you right now. The reason that this committee is here is to move this forward. If your intent is not to be on the committee to move it forward, then maybe you shouldn't be on the committee. And I would say, and if you want to come again, but my intent is to move this concept forward. And then I think sometimes, not only being transparent, but having conversations with other people about your intent and building a critical mass outside of that person is something that you can do as well. It doesn't mean that you only have conversations as a group. You can have individual conversations with people too. And sometimes those individual conversations help shape the group conversation later on.
definitely.
And, so we talked about, if 80% of the group is ready and 20% is not, and one of those 20% is a saboteur, well, you can say to this person what we just talked about, but you can also direct the rest of the people to say, I'm going to spend my time engaged with you and not with that person so that we can actually fulfill the obligation of making this better for everybody.
So as a new leader, what you could do is have a difficult, probably conversation. If you're a new leader with that person, it doesn't, depending on your comfort with these kind of conversations, and just talk about, hey, look, right now we've already identified. So I find using, because it's easy to identify because these people are problem focused rather than solution focused.
Yeah.
So they'll use a thing like, oh, that will never work. Or we tried this 10 years ago, it didn't work. Or actually, I don't think there's anything wrong with this thing that we're trying to do or this part of it. But what you can do is reframe those things and in the individual conversation is No, actually, through a survey, 50 people out of 60 replied on the survey, and they said these are the top 3 challenges and barriers that they have. So kind of reframing it for them, because they're in a power struggle with you. Like, let's be real. That's what's happening here. Because they want to, like you said, keep it status quo because they believe that there's nothing wrong with that process or that system, or maybe that system works for them and they're just trying to hold it back because it's been working for them for this long, and they don't want it to change. So that's one of the things, is reframing that, if you can, back to actually, no, this is a problem because it's been identified by a majority of the staff members. I'm not saying all of them, but a majority of them. And our job is to move these things forward. Actually, another thing I've started doing is, it's our EDM district principal. Whenever they do a presentation, they have like these rules of engagement. So before I do any sort of, after I've done the surveys, to kind of, is this a challenge or a problem? Is it just is this a me thing that I'm noticing? Is this like, other people are noticing? Is when I've started committees, is I will put up 5 like commandments basically. And one of them is, you're solution focused, not problem focused. And some people challenge me on that, saying like, oh, well, how can you talk about solutions when you don't talk about the problems? Well, when I've done the survey and we've done the pre-talking in groups, we've already talked about the problems. Now I've reduced them down, or the group has reduced them down, and now we're focusing on the solutions. And another thing is, it doesn't matter what the solutions are, you should entertain all solutions and see how you'd be amazed at a solution that you personally may think may not work. Is like, as a group, you can ask, okay, this is a solution. How do we make it work? And will this solve the barrier or the challenge that we're having?
So I think, connecting to things that we've talked about in the past, what you're talking about is the culture of that group that's being created or challenged.
Yeah.
Someone who doesn't like the culture shift or the culture engagement,
Yeah.
because they like status quo, and they're the person that's always going to want status quo.
Yeah, for sure.
And yeah, I don't believe
And
in
again,
that.
what does it come down to? Readiness,
Yeah.
right? And this is why we're talking about it today.
Yeah,
Is at the end of the day, they are not ready
they're not.
for that change.
No, no. And yeah, I mean, some people will never be ready. I think that has to do with their personality and, their life outside of work, and their goals and their vision and their ability to reflect and self-assess.
Yeah.
I think they're all woven together um, in some way, and it's your job to balance them and allow people to challenge themselves. And if people aren't wanting to be challenged, then they can either take a back seat or they can go to another organization and find another place to challenge themselves with status quo.
Yes. And you actually taught me something interesting early on in my career, is not everybody needs to be part of the solution. So when you do find people who are resistant, but some people call it resistant. I don't even think I actually use the word ready. They're not, just people are not ready
They're
at
just
that
not
point,
ready.
whether personally or professionally, they're not ready.
Hmm.
Is have those conversations. And then at the end of those conversations, you can say, you can talk about the readiness scale. Like, it seems to me, what I'm hearing is that you're not ready for this change. And I can tell you're not ready because of A, B, and C. And that's okay. But the thing is, because the majority of people have identified this as something that they would like to change, or this is a barrier to success, we're going to go through with it. So maybe you can then watch to see what happens. In worst case scenario, the project falls flat on its face and we have to revamp a few things. Nothing's ever perfect. And you know what? Sometimes you get surprised. Sometimes people will just bow out. And then other times they will watch on the sidelines And then when they see things starting to change, they might actually get inspired and then move up on that readiness scale.
Yeah, it's a fickle concept, but again, organizations are people. We manage people.
Yeah,
And because you manage people, people are emotional creatures. And you have to learn to manage emotions from a social emotional perspective. And there's the social piece and then there's the emotional piece.
yeah.
And they are connected. You work in groups, you work individually. There's dynamics at play. How do you facilitate those opportunities for people? And when there is conflict, how do you support them to work through those as well?
For sure. Okay, so we're nearing the end of our time here. So what I wanted to do was I just want to recap the how for our audience. So Claudio, I'll let you take the first couple here.
Okay, so even from what we were talking about, the things that resonated with me in the house were having conversations with people and individually helping them understand how to move them along on the readiness scale. Also, group conversations, checking out the dynamics and finding out whether the idea or the concept is ready to be implemented or not. I'd also say that, a mentorship or connecting somebody to somebody else or some other research or programming information to allow them to see where they might fit in later on would be other aspects of allowing people the opportunity to buy in whenever they are ready if they haven't bought into the initial concept.
Sounds good. And I think that I want to recap my couple were surveys. So when you're doing surveys, you can leverage surveys. I love leveraging them. Is you can put a lot of questions in there, not only on the actual initiative that you're trying to change, is you can gauge people's readiness, right? So, if there was a committee, how willing are you to sit on that committee? On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being, I believe this needs to really change, and 1 being, I don't think it needs to change at all. So those are things you can preemptively do in surveys to not just see if people want an initiative to go through, but to see how ready people are for that initiative. And then also, when you're talking to people, like you said, whether it's a group or individual, focus on their language, right? So one of the things I focus on is, are they problems focused or are they solution focused? Problem focused would indicate that they're not quite ready for that particular change or just not ready. And overall, look for alignment, right? So is the language and their actions aligned with the change that you are trying to push forward or the group is trying to push forward? So alignment might be like, yes, I think things need to change. And then they come to the group and then they're sabotaging the group. So they're always talking about, oh, actually, this has been tried before, it didn't work, or I don't think this would work. So their actions are not quite aligning with what their value is. So they say their value change, but their actions are showing something else. And again, you can always have conversations during that time. And I think those would be the main ones for me. So that's just a short recap on how, as a leader, that you can navigate through these challenges of readiness with your staff or staff members. Again, we want to thank everybody for tuning into our episodes. Like we said, we're growing and growing a little bit every single day. It makes us very happy and proud that we can give out information that people need. If this information or this episode or there's other episodes, you feel that it would be useful to a friend or a family member, please push it through. Again, you can find us on Spotify and BeanPod. And Claudia, our email address is
habitoverwhy@gmail.com. Please send us a question or a comment. We'd love to hear from you. We look forward to engaging you further with more leadership concepts.
episode 10. Can you believe it? Coming up.
Cannot.
Sounds great. Have a great night, everybody. And Claudio, you also.
All right, Jeevan. Bye for now.
Take care.
How do you lead? Are you passionate about growing strong, resilient leaders who value empathy, self-awareness, and community? Our podcast, Habit Over Why, a look at social-emotional leadership, is dedicated to exploring the transformative power of emotional intelligence in leadership. We bring insightful conversations, compelling stories, and practical strategies to help individuals and organizations thrive in today's dynamic world. By sponsoring our podcast, you'll be supporting thoughtful dialogue and empowering listeners to become mindful, compassionate leaders. Your partnership allows us to reach a wider audience, feature industry experts, and deliver actionable content that makes a real difference. Together, let's build a future where social emotional skills are at the heart of leadership. Join us on this important journey. For sponsorship details and opportunities, please contact us at habitoverwhy@gmail.com. Let's inspire the next generation of leaders, one episode at a time.